I knew betrayal had a sound. For me, it was the cold, steady click of a conference room door locking behind me, followed by the man I trusted saying, without a tremor, "Aaron, you're no longer needed. Not a thank you, not a second thought, just the quiet certainty that I'd been erased by people who had built their entire careers on my back." In that moment, standing there with my badge still warm in my hand, I realized something brutal and unforgettable. They weren't just firing me. They were discarding me because it was easier than admitting how much they'd always depended on me. My name is Aaron Matthews, and that was the day the people who underestimated me the most learned what happens when you push the wrong woman out of the room. The storm didn't start when I walked away. It started the second they did. The morning had that pale, breathless quiet Denver gets before the weather decides what kind of battle it wants to pick. I walked into the operations center the same way I had for years, shrugging off the cold and settling into the familiar hum of servers that sounded older than half the interns we cycled through. Radar screens glowed with shifting wind patterns across the Rockies, those jagged peaks that could flip a flight plan faster than most people could finish a cup of coffee. It was a rhythm I understood without thinking, a language I'd lived inside long enough to feel in my bones. My life outside these walls wasn't complicated. A small apartment in the south end of the city, a son who called when he remembered, or when he needed advice. Evenings were quiet, the kind where you switch off the lights and listen to the wind drag itself across the buildings like it's trying to get in. I didn't mind the solitude. It fit me, or maybe I fit it. Hard to tell which came first. But that morning, something felt off before I even reached my desk. The OCC wasn't loud, but the stillness had a strange edge, like someone had exhaled and forgotten to breathe back in. Then I saw them two unfamiliar chairs set at the end of the main conference table. Not out of place, just out of context. New, gleaming, waiting, and in that tiny, unsettling shift, the way those chairs didn't belong, I felt it. The sky over Denver wasn't just changing outside, it was changing in here too. And I wasn't sure yet whether it was warning me or daring me to look closer. The morning Evan Rutledge walked back into the building. The energy in the OCC shifted like a pressure drop before a storm. He carried himself the way only someone who grew up inside corner offices could. But it was the woman beside him who drew all the attention, Marissa Kane. She looked like she belonged on a lifestyle campaign, not in a room filled with radar screens and wind models. Evan introduced her as the new architect of our future, a visionary ready to redefine how the company operated. She barely glanced at the data displays before launching into her philosophy about visual clarity and simplifying complicated workflows. She talked about removing noise from the weather feeds, making everything easier on the eyes. I felt the hair on my neck rise. She wasn't talking about aesthetics. She was erasing warnings that kept planes from slamming into mountainsides. By mid-afternoon, my worst suspicion materialized. A critical wind shear alert, one that lived at the very top of our winter protocol, blinked out with an error message I'd never seen. When I traced the source, the log listed internal guest access, not a name, not even initials, just an anonymous shadow tampering with the part of the system no one should touch without years of training. That was when my stomach dropped. Someone who didn't understand the consequences had reached into the engine room and started flipping switches. Before I could act, an email arrived from Evan, a gentle reminder that maybe I was being too cautious, too protective of features the team found overwhelming. He said speed mattered, cleanliness mattered, people appreciated simplicity. I stared at the radar beside me, jet stream curls tightening into the early bones of a winter spiral, a sky that would punish anyone who underestimated it. But Marissa's pastel dashboard wouldn't catch any of that. It would paint the turbulence green and call it a good day. I closed my laptop knowing one thing: someone who didn't understand storms was being allowed to redesign how we survived them. 2 days later, the meeting appeared on the public board winter routing strategy, the kind of meeting that used to require my presence before anyone else. Yet my email stayed empty. No agenda, no invitation, just silence. A technician stopped me in the hallway. Confused why I wasn't inside presenting, confusion turned to dread the closer I got to the conference suite. The door hadn't latched. Evan's voice spilled through the crack light. Casual, promising a streamlined future where half the technical team could be trimmed once their new tools were fully integrated. Trimmed! Like we were clutter. Then the twist hit. I glimpsed Marissa's slide deck projected across the room, pastel dashboards, buzzwords about optimization, and a plan to outsource the entire meteorology division to a tech company owned by her friend. It wasn't innovation. It was a sale. Everything snapped into focus. I wasn't simply being excluded. I was the obstacle they needed gone. I stepped forward, ready to push the door open, but a security guard intercepted me. He apologized, said I wasn't cleared for the meeting. Through the frosted glass, I watched the room glow with colors that meant nothing. A beautiful lie dressed as progress, a dashboard pretty enough to fool them, and deadly enough to bury me. Snow hammered Denver hard enough that the parking lot lights looked like they were floating in a white blur. Before leaving home, my independent radar flashed a subtle warning. Upper-level winds had begun shifting long before sunrise. By the time I stepped into the OCC, something felt wrong. Hushed voices, anxious glances, young engineers clustered around a laptop as if they'd uncovered buried treasure. Then I saw it, on the main display. Marissa's pastel dashboard was glowing like a cheerful screensaver soft blues, pinks, gradients pretending they belonged in a place that lived or died by precision. No memo, no rollout plan, no briefing. It was just there, humming like it owned the room. I opened the system logs, expecting the usual update trail. Instead, a line of red text hit me square in the chest. Admin WX Aaron changed to viewer only. That single downgrade severed every safeguard I'd built. I couldn't edit, override, or correct. I couldn't protect a single plane. I went straight to Evan's office. He and Marissa were mid-presentation, walking the team through her streamlined interface. When I asked where the jet stream shift indicators went, or why downdraft and turbulence clusters no longer displayed, she smiled like she was offering me tea instead of a death sentence. Those terms were too stressful, she said. Pilots preferred colors that felt warm. Warm wouldn't keep anyone alive. Back at my desk, my email lit up with restrictions. Forecast core suspended. Weather map X reassigned. My name, erased from my own work. Signed by Evan. As casually as approving a lunch order. Then Captain Rhodes appeared, still shaking snow off his coat. The route to Aspen wasn't showing low-level warnings. He trusted his gut more than any interface, and his gut said something was off. According to the pastel dashboard, the skies were stable. According to my private radar, 2 wind eddies were tightening near the valley. I flagged it. Evan brushed it aside, claiming unnecessary alerts made pilots anxious. By afternoon, the final blow landed. A notification removed me from every winter operations meeting, the same meetings I'd led for over a decade. No explanation. No conversation. Just silence. They weren't only shutting me out of the room, they were cutting me out of the sky. I was reviewing wind data when the summons appeared. 3:00 p.m. Meeting with HR, Evan, and Marissa. No reason. No agenda. Just a time slot. Cold and unmistakable. Inside the room, Evan sat rigid, rehearsed. Marissa lounged beside him, confident in a way that told me the outcome was already settled. HR recited their script restructuring, shifting priorities, evolving direction. Then came the accusations: negativity, resistance, failure to align with the company's vision. Marissa chimed in, claiming I intimidated younger staff. If they could read a pressure chart correctly, they might have been harder to intimidate. When I asked for evidence, Evan lifted Marissa's tablet like it was gospel. The new system needed fresh energy, he said. People who understood the aesthetic. I didn't argue. I signed. My phone buzzed instantly. Access to WX Core revoked. 14 years of forecasting vanished with a single deactivation. In the elevator, I heard a young engineer panic over speakerphone. Turbulence alerts were gone. Upper wind markers wiped clean. Denver showing absolutely stable. The doors closed. Their voices echoed. A real storm was coming, and they had blinded themselves. I didn't destroy anything. I simply wasn't there to save them. The night after they pushed me out, sleep wouldn't come. My head kept replaying the look on their faces, self-assured, oblivious, convinced they'd modernize something they didn't understand. Near midnight, I gave up trying to rest and opened my personal laptop. The independent radar I relied on outside of work was already pulsing with trouble, upper-level winds twisting in ways that only meant one thing. A mountain wave storm was forming, one of the most vicious patterns the Rockies could throw at a mid-range aircraft. The map lit up in tight red spirals. I touched the screen, instinctive and useless, feeling a knot pull tight under my ribs. Their pastel dashboard wouldn't catch this. It didn't know how. It wasn't built for danger, it was built for branding. Morning came with bitter coffee and shaking hands. The National Weather Report confirmed everything I'd seen, winds shifting unpredictably, jet stream anomalies spreading. Other airlines were advised to monitor turbulence indexes closely. Rocky Mountain Air couldn't monitor anything, they'd erased the tools that could. My phone buzzed with a message that hit like a punch. Captain Rhodes. The most seasoned pilot we had. Aaron, no warnings on the Aspen route. Our backup radar keeps flickering. Are we missing something? I couldn't answer him. I didn't have access anymore. All I had was the truth sitting in my stomach like ice. The new system was painting the sky green, while the real atmosphere twisted itself into a threat. By noon, another message arrived from a former colleague, panic bleeding through the words. Turbulence index dropped to 0. The OCC is screaming. Aaron, where are you? Where I was became the sharpest cut. Home. Watching snow blow sideways across my windows. Watching the weather unravel in real time, while the company that dismissed me staggered toward a disaster I'd spent years preventing. Early afternoon, Denver news switched to emergency updates. FAA had asked Rocky Mountain Air for advanced forecasting data. The airline hadn't responded. I knew exactly why they didn't have anything left. Marissa's pastel dream had scrubbed every meaningful metric. Then the breaking headline hit Flight 614, circling at 18,000 feet due to routing instability. I snapped open my radar. A violent red whirlpool of wind was barreling straight into its path. My hands clenched the counter as I whispered directions no one could hear anymore. And then came the final blow. The model projection showed the storm collapsing southward twice as fast as predicted. A movement only my old algorithms could have caught. They were staring at a pretty lie. I was staring at the truth. I knew what came next. They'd try to fix it. They'd fail. And then they'd call me. That evening, every station cut to breaking news. 6 Rocky Mountain Air flights had been ordered into emergency holding patterns. A shaky cell phone video from inside one cabin showed passengers crying, luggage falling, oxygen masks rattling overhead. My pulse hammered. This was the very nightmare I had spent 14 years working to prevent. A pilot's voice cut through the broadcast, strained and cracking. Rocky Ops, this is 328, no route update, requesting urgent guidance. I recognized that tone. A man who knew the sky was slipping away from him. Then came a leaked video from inside OCC. Chaos everywhere. Marissa's pastel dashboard flickered between cheerful colors like a broken holiday decoration. Not a single useful data point on the screen. One engineer shouted over the panic. No turbulence map. No jet stream layer. Nothing. Everything I had built, erased for the sake of aesthetics. Minutes later, a national alert. FAA has issued a full ground stop on all Rocky Mountain Air flights. A ground stop was financial detonation. 10 minutes could drain a company, an hour could kill it. They were already past that mark. Then a second clip surfaced, CEO Rutledge storming into the control center. Face red, voice shaking with fury. Where is the data who approved removing the warnings? Evan stuttered uselessly. Marissa cried. And the CEO shouted the truth the whole country heard. You fired the only person who understood this sky. Snow slammed against my windows as my phone rang. His name lit the screen. CEO Rutledge. For a long second, I just stared at it. Then I answered. His voice cracked with desperation. Aaron, please, come back. We need you. They need you. I looked at my radar, still pulsing red, still honest, still warning what they refused to see, and with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years, I said the only thing that was true. This isn't my sky to hold anymore. I ended the call. The storm kept roaring. And for the first time, I let it. The phone finally stopped buzzing, but the storm outside only grew louder. I stood at the window, watching snow swallow the city, while the radar on my laptop pulsed in tight, frantic spirals. The old system showed the truth in red arcs and violent currents, truth no one at OCC could see anymore. Then the phone rang again. CEO Rutledge. I answered because I already knew why he was calling. His voice came through rough, trembling. Aaron, people are trapped up there. The dashboard isn't matching real conditions. We can't navigate. Please. I heard panic. But beneath it, something heavier regret. He pushed on. Desperate. Evan has taken responsibility. FAA wants your input. If you come back now, you'll have full control. A cold, tired laugh rose before I could stop it. You fired me for telling the truth. Now the truth is burying you. Wind slammed against the glass, as if echoing the chaos. I saw flashes in my mind, shaking cabins, terrified passengers, pilots fighting blind. For 14 years, I saved them from their own recklessness. But this time, I'm not part of that system anymore. I hung up. The storm raged. The next morning, an email from the FAA landed in my inbox, crisp and formal, requesting my presence to provide information regarding the routing failures of the 14th and 15th. I wasn't their employee anymore, so I arrived as a private citizen, someone who had nothing left to lose and nothing left to defend except the truth. The hearing room felt colder than the Denver air outside. High ceilings, white fluorescent lighting, and the American flag standing rigid behind a long table of investigators. Everything about the space demanded honesty. Everything about it reminded me that data never lies. Only people do. I took my seat as the lead investigator opened a laptop and began presenting the information the airline had submitted. It took me less than 3 minutes to see the gaps, entire layers of warnings missing. All the advanced markers I had built were simply gone, not hidden, deleted. They asked the first question directly. Miss Matthews, can you confirm you developed the advanced forecasting model? I told them I had written every line of it myself and updated it constantly for 14 years. Were you consulted before those warning layers were disabled? No. I placed a folder on the table. Inside were printed copies of my ignored emails, warnings dismissed, concerns waved off, empty reassurances that the new dashboard would replace everything. I slid them across. The room went silent in a way that felt heavy. Not empty. The investigators cross-checked system logs. Every deletion command traced back to administrative accounts authorized by Evan and Marissa. Every decision that blinded the system was documented in their names. Then CEO Rutledge walked in. His face was drained of color, fixed on the floor instead of me, a man finally staring at the wreckage he helped create. The FAA issued its preliminary conclusion. The airline had violated safety protocol by removing critical personnel and dismantling essential systems without any transition plan. Evan was escorted out. Marissa didn't bother to appear. She was labeled uncooperative. I sat quietly, fingers brushing the bracelet my son had given me. For the first time in years, everything felt aligned. I hadn't destroyed them. They had destroyed themselves. 2 weeks after everything unraveled, the official reports began to surface. Rocky Mountain Air was suspended from operating for 90 days, a blow so devastating it shook the industry. CEO Rutledge removed Evan and the entire leadership circle involved in the disaster. Marissa evaporated from every social platform as if she had never existed. No statements, no photos, not even a remnant of her pastel empire. And with losses climbing into the hundreds of millions, the airline finally surrendered and sold itself to a larger carrier. For the first time, those headlines didn't feel like knives. They felt like the simple, unvarnished consequences of choices made by people who refused to listen. Meanwhile, the snow outside my window thinned, softened, and eventually gave way to the first hints of spring. That was when the call came. Pacific Voyager Airlines, one of the most respected names on the West Coast, reached out with a tone I hadn't heard addressed to me in years, genuine respect. We know you're the one person who truly understands the Rockies' weather behavior. We'd like you to lead our new systems team. The timing felt unreal, like the universe was nudging me forward just when I needed certainty that my work still mattered, so I agreed to meet them in Boulder. The cafe where we sat wasn't flashy or decorated within an inch of its life. It was quiet, warm, smelling faintly of roasted beans and pine from the open door, a far cry from pastel dashboards and hollow pitches about innovation. They asked only one question: what do you need to work at your best? For the first time in my career, I didn't water down my answer: autonomy and respect. They nodded instantly, no hesitation, no explanations, no corporate dance, just acceptance, clean and simple. A few weeks later, I found a small house perched on a hillside overlooking the valley, where the mornings unfurled slowly and the sky didn't feel hostile or heavy. I settled in with a peace I'd nearly forgotten I was capable of feeling. One early morning, wrapped in a sweater and holding a mug of hot coffee, I stepped onto the porch. The air was sharp with the last breath of winter. A Pacific Voyager plane appeared over the ridge, slicing through the quiet sky. Its trajectory followed the optimized model I had built days earlier, hugging the safest corridor with perfect precision. No tremor, no struggle, just the smooth, confident line of something guided by truth, not aesthetics, not ego. I exhaled, a long breath that felt like letting go of years of weight. My smile wasn't for Rocky Mountain Air's downfall. It wasn't for revenge. It was for the realization that, after everything, I had reclaimed the part of myself they tried to bury. I had spent years warning others about the sky, but I finally learned that sometimes the real danger isn't in the storm, it's in staying where your voice is no longer heard. And when you walk away, the horizon opens wider than you ever imagined.